Hey everyone, interesting angle for my first clip, but welcome to another reading vlog. I am starting The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. This is going to be a spoiler-filled reading vlog, meaning that I will be talking about everything that happens within this book as I'm going through it. I will be talking about Mistborn Era 1. I'm pretty sure that I will mention parts of that series. I will not mention any of the other Cosmere works. I will contradict myself somewhere on the screen if I do end up doing so. But so in principle, this is just going to be spoiling anything that kind of comes before this book. I have not read this book before. This is going to be the first time that I'm reading it. So in terms of the spoilery content, I will obviously not be able to refer to anything that happens in later books within this series, and I won't be able to foreshadow what's going to be happening later on in the book. So I'm very much looking forward to diving into this one. I am looking forward to it, but at the same time I'm kind of hesitant, but I guess that at this point in time I've kind of overcome my hesitation with this one. Basically, I absolutely love Mistborn Era 1. It's probably like my favorite fantasy series, or one of my favorite fantasy series. Rereading it now made me kind of think that I didn't necessarily love the final book within it the way that I loved the Final Empire itself, for example, and the Well of Ascension, but it still holds a very near and dear spot in my heart. And I was very hesitant to dive into this second trilogy, or no, not a trilogy, the second series within the Mistborn world, because of my love for the first series, basically. And because I know that it is very different, and that a lot of people who absolutely love Mistborn were kind of disappointed with this one because of its very different tone. I'm expecting it to be a lot more like light, a lot more sort of like plot centered, maybe a lot more like case of the day type of structure. I think it has to do with a sort of like detective duo, and that is basically all that I know. I do not like detective style stories. I do not necessarily like finding out, who did it or anything like that, for example, in a sort of like murder scenario. So we'll have to see how that goes. I do very much love Brandon Sanderson's writing style. I love his sort of like plot developments and things like that. But I have been disappointed by him in the past, specifically when it came to sort of like detective-centered story, in the sense of I read Legion and I didn't like it. So we'll have to see. I don't have any sort of other ideas going into this before diving into it. I don't know too much more about it, and I am keeping it that vague. Hey guys, a few days later. I've basically only read the introduction and first chapter up until this point, but I'm expecting to make quite some headway into it tonight. So what are my first thoughts based on that sort of like very short introduction that I've had so far, because I think I'm like 40 pages or so into it, so like a tenth of the way, is that I'm not entirely a big fan of the backstory of Waximilian or something like that, having lost the love of his life, because it's kind of similar to the backstory of Kelsier. But if the rest of his storyline is handled very differently, then I can make peace with that, definitely. And it's kind of interesting to have a protagonist now that is really like from the nobility. We definitely had that as well in sort of like the latter half of Mistborn Era 1, in which we had Ellen's perspective that we were also following from. But it's going to be interesting to have it really be like one of the central characters. Not yet fully sure where the story is moving towards, but I'll definitely be able to find that out today, I'm assuming.
In all of us, in our hearts, there's love and light that we must realize. We need to feel, we need to use this warmth that could make bright our lives. In all of us, in our hearts, there's love and light that we must realize. We need to feel, we need to use.
So much for me thinking that this was gonna be a quick read, but so. What do I already want to talk about? I think the main things that I'm liking are kind of the Easter eggs to the original series. But at the same time, that is something that probably is also hindering my enjoyment. I don't necessarily enjoy stories that are kind of linked to other stories, because it kind of makes me just want to read those other stories a lot of the time versus the new thing. And so it's always kind of difficult or kind of a risk going into a linked series, for example. And so what I'm enjoying here is kind of seeing that development of the magic system. There's so many new powers. I've already had kind of a sneak peek at the different sort of like elementic and feruchemist powers. I also like the idea that, you know, now we have the combination of the two. Now we have characters who have elementic and feruchemical powers. And, you know, I think that that can take the whole sort of like magic system to very interesting places. And then what I'm definitely also enjoying is, you know, the fact that we now have the religion centered around the hero of ages, kind of having a showdown between that religion and the religion that is founded around Kelsier. And, you know, I like the idea of, you know, Sazed's looking down upon people who are praying in his name, and you know, that sort of idea that he's chuckling over what they're telling him and that he's guiding them through their lives. But I must say that I am kind of struggling with it so far. I thought this was going to be like a super quick read and that I could easily get through like 100 pages of this today. But, you know, I need to check like where I'm at in a chapter before the chapter is even finished, and they're not even that long chapters. So I gotta say that it is that case where the story, the type of story, is just not really something that interests me. I am liking the characters. I am intrigued about some of the character dynamics and where this is going to go. But when it comes to that whole sort of like storyline of what these people are trying to do, what these robbers are trying to do, I don't really have a lot of interest in that, and as a result, the story isn't really moving forward quickly for me. But so yeah, we'll just have to see. Perhaps this will be the final book that I finish this month, and then hopefully I'll still get around to liking it when I'm further into the book, and perhaps we will have a little bit more of a focus on some of the character stuff, for example, further down into this volume, and then that is also something that can help me through it a little bit quicker. All right, I am past the 200-page mark of this book, and I definitely think I need to talk to you guys about this at some point. But so I think last time that I updated you guys, I was saying that I really wasn't all that invested yet, and definitely that has changed, because I definitely think that this plot isn't the type of plot that is like my favorite type of plot, because I don't really like that type of detective style story. But the characters and the character dynamics are really what are pushing me through this one, plus the magic system, because I definitely do still love this magic system, of course, and I'm really enjoying seeing the developments of this magic system over time and the way in which it is used now. I think it is very interesting. I think it's an interesting choice that Brandon Sanderson made to kind of. I think it's a very interesting choice that Brandon Sanderson made to kind of get rid of the idea of Mistborn, of people who have all of these powers at the same time. I think it creates some interesting dynamics with them only having access to sort of like one elementic power, and then potentially them having access to one elementic power and a feruchemical power. And it's very interesting, the introduction of, compounding, was it? Where if somebody has the same sort of like elementic elements and feruchemical elements that they are linked to, that they have access to, then they can then those kind of multiply. So you can kind of layer those powers on top of one another, and the effect will be higher than if somebody who has sort of like iron elementic power and gold feruchemical power, for example, they won't have that sort of same impact when they use either one of these two as somebody who has a gold elementic and a gold feruchemical power does. So I'm finding that very interesting, and I'm finding it very interesting to see that sort of combination between the elementic powers and the feruchemical powers. I kind of liked both systems a lot, but I kind of thought that the feruchemical system was perhaps even more ingenious than the elementic powers that our protagonist had, because when we spent more time with Sazed in Mistborn Era 1, it was just so interesting to look at the dynamic of storing certain powers in order to use, storing certain things such as health, for example, in order to access it later. And so I always loved that power, and I love seeing that sort of dynamic now of having access to these two types of powers and the dynamic that that creates in the fight scenes and the sort of vast range of differences that that creates in terms of people with these powers. You can only have access to elementic, you can have access to ferrochemical, you can have access to both. If you have access to both, you might have very different combinations. So I really love that aspect to the world and to the evolution of this world. Aside from that, I find these sort of like small Easter eggs to the original series quite interesting to see those names pop off of like the what is she called here, the Ascension Warrior, I think, which is Vin, and then references to Harmony, which is then the Hero of Ages, and then like the Lord Mistborn, which I'm not entirely sure who the Lord Mistborn is. Is this Spook? I've already forgotten his name, because Spoops is a booktuber, so Spook, I guess. So those types of things are interesting, and they're also so contained because these characters are now sort of like mythical beings in their world at this point in time. They don't know the true nature of these people anymore, and so they've kind of become mythical beings. But so yeah, when it comes to Wax and Wayne, I'm definitely falling in love with those guys a lot more than I was in sort of like the first two chapters. First two chapters, I still kind of felt like, it's a dynamic we see a lot. That's sort of like a hero and sidekick sort of story line. But I've definitely grown to love them a lot more as I get further into the story. And I absolutely love the character of, what is her name? Because I can not fully remember the exact way in which her name works. Marissa or Matis, something like that. Marassi. Marassi, I think, is a great character and just introduces such an interesting element because she's like an outsider introduced into this sort of like group dynamic. She's kind of our way into this group, into this duo, and she's hopefully going to become a permanent fixture to this story, to this duo, and they're going to become a team of three, I hope. But what's mainly getting me going here are these sort of like ways in which this magic system is evolving, and in which Brandon Sanderson is so great at using these magic systems and coming up with spectacular battle sequences. Close to 11. I have like 30 pages or so to go to finish. But so very close to the ending. We basically just have kind of like had the showdown, and so this Miles guy has just been taken. And I like the fact of, Marassi's power being used. I mean, it was kind of clear that was going to be something that was going to develop either in this book or later in the series, but I think it is an interesting use to her power, and so it'll be fun to see what we will be doing with that in later books, assuming she's going to be in there in the other books. But so yeah, I'll just continue on with this one, but I'm not entirely sure whether I can still finish it today because I'm getting really tired right now. So probably best to just go to sleep and, tackle the last 30 pages with a fresh mind tomorrow morning. All right, so I finished it and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a whole lot. For me, a book needs to be more than, great fun for me to give it like a 5-star, for example. So this is definitely going to stay within the 4-star range, but I enjoyed it a whole lot, and so it was a fun ride, a successful read. I'll definitely be continuing. I definitely have fond memories of reading this, but it's just not like a new all-time favorite or anything like that. I did kind of like, I wasn't entirely super fan of the uncle of Wax being the suit. Kind of feel like there wasn't enough sort of like setup for that. I know that it made sense with, it was linking to certain elements that have been mentioned, but I kind of feel like there usually is a little bit more foreshadowing with Brandon Sanderson than there was here. But perhaps that is also like, maybe when I reread this at some point, I'll be like, oh yeah, it was very much hinted at already from the beginning. that was the case, but I do still like that development. I mean, I like the way in which he outwitted Wax and, the sort of like setup for the next book that happened there. So I'm liking that. So yeah, I'm very much still okay with that development in the end. And, always very annoying when characters are like staying away from the person that they potentially will love because they're like, yeah, I'm not going to be good for them. And that just makes me go like, why, Wax? Why do you not want to encourage morality, and then you still are going to pursue this stupid love affair with her sister? But okay. But those types of storytelling sometimes irks me a little bit, but okay, fine. I was expecting it to go like that, of course. And then very interesting to have, first off, Harmony talking to Wax during his fight. So very much looking forward to more interruptions by Harmony, so to speak. And to have Iron Eyes there. I mean, I already assumed, of course, when he was mentioned earlier that he was Marsh, but I always kind of assumed that Marsh had died in Mistborn. Like I'm not gonna bother going back to see whether there was any reference of that or not, but that had always kind of been my assumption that he had died at that point in time. But so he apparently is still alive for all those times. So what has he been doing through all of that? But okay, so I'm gonna be rounding off my vlog here. So what do I want for the second book? Just more of the same, but if possible to have a little bit more of a, I don't know, a grander scale implication in there at some point. That's just something that, to me, for fantasy, I just like epic fantasy, and so that is kind of what would augment the series for me, which could push it into 5-star territory, for example. I know most people prefer Bands of Mourning, so who knows, maybe we'll get some major events in that one. But in any case, I'm rounding off the vlog here. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will definitely be doing the same for the remaining books within this series. And I might be picking up the next one pretty quickly because I want to get it done within the first half of August. And since it is the 31st of July now, that is pretty soon probably. But so yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. See you for the next one. Bye.